Hey guys, Marsinger here, bringing up Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle video, and so today we are going to talk about the big subject that has been going around in the community since the reveal of the standalone Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Even before we saw how crazy his animations were, even just the fact that it was a standalone Gogeta got people going on this subject again. I posted like a bait meme, which was pretty funny, of this cycle of people complaining every time there's a new Vegito that we need more Gogeta stuff, and every time there's a new Gogeta we need more Vegito stuff. And the funny thing is, like, I posted it just because I thought it was a funny meme. I saw it in the Discord, it was from Reddit. You know, it's one of those, it wasn't me trying to make a proper serious point. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people, I guess Vegito fans especially, got very defensive that, like, oh, you know, nobody has ever said this about Gogeta. Like, Gogeta always gets treated so well in Dokkan, and like Vegito just gets left to the wayside and all this kind of stuff. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look back at some of the units. It's not, we're not going to look at every single Vegito and Gogeta in the game, but there are some interesting parallels that we can make. Now obviously the big thing, of course, we got the Goku, who has an active skill that fuses into Vegito. So we've got a really cool Vegito Blue animation, the way he does like the massive spirit sword thing in the Vegito Blue active skill is super cool, but it is just an active skill, whereas we got a new Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta standalone, so you just have Gogeta out straight away from the first turn, and of course he is very good. Like, not only is the unit incredibly good, he probably, I wouldn't say he's like hands down, like undisputed the best unit in the game, because there are some instances where his defense is not the best against like the hardest hitting enemies. There's been some screenshots going around of like him taking damage from normals, from like the hardest hitting built up bosses, like fully built up Rose and stuff like that. But for the most part, he's like in that same sort of tier as the best units in the game overall, right? But yeah, he's incredibly good. He's Gogeta straight out of the gate. So is Dokkan always more biased and always more preferential to Gogeta? So first of all, if we take a look at the list of characters, so we've got Super Gogeta. Now bear in mind that Super Gogeta appeared for like, what, 5 minutes, if that, at the end of one movie, which until Wrath of the Dragon came out was the last Dragon Ball Z movie, and then obviously after Wrath of the Dragon there was a huge gap. Not a lot of people huge fans of like characters like Harudagan, although people obviously big fans of like the Dragon Fist, but Fusion Reborn sort of stayed a lot of people's favourite movie from the end of Z era, like for quite a while. You know, growing up with Z on Cartoon Network and then finally finding some of the movies online and stuff, it was definitely one of the ones that I really liked. So considering Super Gogeta appeared in like, you know, 5 minutes of a movie, he has one unit of each typing for Super Gogeta. But bear in mind, we never saw base Gogeta in that movie, right? If they fused and they were just already Super Saiyan Gogeta. So up until the release of the Broly movie, we never actually got any base Gogetas, because we'd never seen base Gogeta before. So obviously when the movie came out, we got the Super Saiyan one that goes blue. And then, yeah, eventually we got the base one that goes blue, as well as a free-to-play base one in that anniversary. And then we also got a free-to-play base one as part of the anniversary login for the 9th anniversary, right? So that for Gogeta, if we take a look at Vegito, we have a Super Vegito over every typing. So pretty even on that front. And then base Vegito, we have one of every typing except physical. So obviously, you know, I'm not going to make a comparison there and say, oh, see, look, straight away Vegito getting better treatment, because obviously base Vegito actually has source material. And I guess technically, I guess you could argue the STR one doesn't really count, because the STR base Vegito is just the TUR of LR Vegito Blue, and you're not really going to use him in that form really at all. And then of course there is also the bonus like Candy Vegito as like a joke. But I mean, this card was pretty cool when it came out, right? Free to play dodging stunning card was pretty good. Then when we look at, this is the big one that people point out a lot, Super Saiyan Blue Vegito. So we have one of every single typing. 3 of them are standalone. Vegito Blue, Physical, STR LR, and then the Tech TUR. Gogeta has no standalone. There are no standalone Gogeta Blue cards in the entire game. We've got transforming. We've got 2 transforming ones here, transforming one here. No standalone Vegito Blues, Gogeta Blues in the game at all. Obviously, the Super Saiyan Gogeta is like an extra thing from the movies. I guess you can kind of say that they balance out a little bit there. And then just lastly, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Obviously, we do have a few of these. And then when it comes to Vegito, we do get the Super Saiyan 4 Vegito and Limit Breaker Vegito from Heroes. Never got any of the Heroes Gogetas. Gogeta has Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 in Heroes as well as having normal Super Saiyan 4 but with Kaioken stacked on top. So like there's a couple of Heroes Gogetas we could have got but we never did. So in terms of Heroes, Vegito obviously gets the only shine there. So when you look at the different units, it's kind of evenly balanced, right? Like sure, Gogeta doesn't have any standalone blues, but he does have like a couple of extra versions because of the Dragon Ball Super Gogeta. But let's go ahead and take a look at the actual releases. So the big thing that started everything off, I guess, is that when we had the first anniversary, we've got the headliner for the anniversary STR Gogeta. And this guy was like hands down the best unit in the game. People still meme about it even today, that when a crazy new unit comes out, it's like, are they on the level of like STR Gogeta on release? But like this guy was literally, you had this guy or your account was trash. Like people wouldn't accept friend requests from you if your friend leader wasn't STR Gogeta. People were just re-rolling to get him because essentially if you didn't have him, like your account was pointless at that time, which is kind of crazy. You know, with the attacks effective against all types, which I think was the introduction of this mechanic, he was able to do damage to even the toughest bosses, even bosses like in the Broly Dokkan event, where you were supposed to use mechanics like a specific link or defense lowering in order to actually be able to do any damage. Gogeta could just do damage to him, and obviously with an all types lead, you could run like any team setup you wanted. So he was really, really good. And then the first Super Vegito that we got, this was anniversary for 2016, February 2016. Then in July 2016, we got AGL Super Vegito. Now, AGL Super Vegito, whilst you could probably argue overall, like, not as good as STR Gogeta in terms of, like, how crazy on release or anything like that, this guy was still probably one of the best units in the game on his release. I remember this was around the time that I seriously started playing Dokkan. I played it a little bit before, broke my phone, didn't even re-download Dokkan when I got my new phone, and then like I remember when I finally decided to actually recapture my account, this was the banner that I summoned. When I first logged in, I recaptured my account, logged in, and the main banner was the release of AGL Super Vegito and Physical Legendary Super Saiyan Broly. And I pulled Vegito and he was insane, obviously because I hadn't been playing for a while. Like I didn't have Gogeta, but Vegito was ridiculous. Like you'd crush through events, he'd be destroying everything with the counters, and he was really, really good. So the first 2 iterations of these units were both really good and really, really strong. So then as we start to move forward down the timeline, we get the next big Vegito release was Physical Vegito Blue. And this guy on release was arguably one of the best units in the game. He introduced the super class sort of leader skill meta along with the AGL Rosé, where you no longer had to worry about mono-typing teams and you could just throw all of the super class units that you had on his team. His team, like running him back when he came out, it was going to be like him, STR Gogeta, AGL Vegito, Tech Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Like his team was just really, really good, and he was really good. He didn't have quite the same damage reduction as the AGL Vegito, but still had the damage reduction against normals and could do counters. And then obviously he had the extra super chance as well. So he was really, really good. And then the next Gogeta release was when we got the 120 lead Int Gogeta. And I mean, he was good on release, but like he's very basic, right? He lowers attack and defense on super, attack 120, attacks effective against all types. It's funny seeing passives like this back in the meta where you didn't actually even need defense in your passive and this unit was still good. But like, even coming out in April 2017 compared to this guy dropping in November 2016, so like what, 6 months before. Vegito Blue is better than this in Gogeta. In Gogeta probably hit harder at the time, but Vegito Blue better overall. I mean, obviously this guy being the super int 120 leader had his value for making that specific team. But even then, even when we started to move into the 120 meta for mono teams, you could still use the Vegito and Rose like extreme and super typings by mixing in all these units and even using some of the new 120 leads themselves on those teams. So I would say around this time, like this Vegito Blue still absolutely had more value. And by the time this guy came out, if you think about, like, even though his passive is very basic, like, so is this guy, right? So realistically, the int one was better than the STR one, so he was replaced. Whereas around this time, you could still get away with using AGL Super Vegito, because in the 120 meta, the AGL 120 lead was Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta from the 2nd anniversary. And yeah, on a Super AGL team, you would be running AGL Super Vegito, so he was still completely relevant, this guy was still relevant, and then this guy replaced STR Gogeta. And then a little while after his release, we got the next Super Vegito. Now obviously this guy was a little bit disappointing. I think even I said at the time, like, this was very early in my content creation career, because I'd not started making videos obviously as soon as I'd got back onto playing Dokkan, but I remember recording summons for this guy after finishing a night shift. And even on release, I didn't like this guy as much as the AGL Super Vegito. So this was kind of a fumble release, to be fair, especially considering they just dropped this guy who had essentially replaced the previous Super Gogeta, whereas this guy didn't feel as good as the previous Super Vegito, which is unfortunate. But they did follow that up not very long after. This was October 2017, this is December 2017. We then got the Tech Vegito Blue, and obviously the new meta of like super type and extreme types, which was interesting that they kept it at 120, because a lot of the times when they've done these more inclusive leader skills, they've obviously dropped the percentage, right? Like the original Vegito Blue and Rose were 50% leads for super and extreme when we were in the 70% lead meta. And then these guys came out and they matched that 120, but you had to have one unit of each typing, which could be annoying at times, but was still like a very good and very fun team. This guy was interesting because he was probably one of the first that I can remember, I guess. Not that the meme was a thing then, but just the kind of unit we would say now, that this guy was kind of the definition of the potential man, like first character, because great chance to launch up to 2 additional attacks, each of which has a medium chance to become a super. Like, you could absolutely get turns where he just did like 1 additional normal or something, and that was it. Whereas you get the good RNG turns, he was a stacker, like he could obviously be really, really good. So in terms of like how good he was on release compared to the physical one, I don't know if he was considered as good, but he was still considered a very good and very strong release. So that's another Vegito, and of course no standalone Blue Gogeta in the game yet, because of course until we got the Broly movie, like Blue Gogeta just didn't exist, right? It was more just it was a fan art or like fan sort of creation thing at that point. So then we got on to the 3rd anniversary. So this is the thing I want to point out as well when it comes to like the big headline celebrations, because that's what people are complaining about now, right, with the Vegito and Gogeta in the Global Dokkan campaign. So the 3rd year anniversary was the fusing Goku and Vegetas that could fuse into Gogeta or Vegito. And if you were playing the game at the time, I'm sure you remember, like Vegito was considered hands down better than Gogeta, right? Both units gave you a full heal when they transformed, and then Vegito counters normals with tremendous power, had his stats, and then got extra ki per rainbow. And then the Gogeta recovered the HP, attacks effective against all types, stats, and then ki. So when you look at what they do, like technically, apart from attacks effective against all types, which just means his attacks do a little bit more damage, Gogeta doesn't do anything, like any additional like sort of ability in the turn. Vegito has counters. Like, he doesn't have the big damage reduction against normals, so he wasn't like AGL Super Vegito where he would just absolutely tank everything for like double digits at the time in the meta or whatever. Like, this guy didn't have that, so he could get slapped by some of the harder hitting bosses as time went by, but like on release this guy was absolutely ridiculous, and if you could get the fusion you won, which is funny when you think about the going forward to where we are now with like the Tech Vegito and how people talk about him, right, from the 10th anniversary. But if you manage to get this guy out, because the transformation condition was a little bit annoying, it was like 50% or less HP from turn 6, so it took a while to get there. But this guy was absolutely ridiculous, and like Gogeta was not bad at all, but like I don't think there was anyone at the time that I can remember. There probably was the odd person, because there's always contrarians, but like nobody thought Gogeta was better than Vegito when it came to the anniversary unit's performance. So there's a big thing like right there where Vegito again clearly better than Gogeta in this celebration. We finally got our first Dragon Ball Super Broly Gogeta, who of course was the Super Saiyan 1 that transformed into blue. He was really, really good on release, so you could probably argue comparing him to things like the Tech Vegito Blue, TUR, probably better on release than something like that, I guess. And then we also got, I'm not sure if I had the, where did I put the, okay, yeah, they are a little bit further ahead. So not long after this, we got the 5th anniversary, because the 4th anniversary was the Super Saiyan 4s again. And then the 5th anniversary was the base Gogeta that transforms into blue from the Broly movie. And then the base Vegito that transforms into Vegito Blue. Now again, flashbacks to the 3rd year anniversary. Most people, some people obviously liked the animations for Gogeta more because he had that really awesome final Kamehameha. But most people at the time, during the anniversary when it was going on, most people thought that Vegito was better than Gogeta again, because he actually has like guaranteed additional super attack as part of his passive, another guaranteed additional super attack in slot 3, and then Gogeta had a guaranteed additional normal and attacks effective against all types. So just like the 3-year ones, it seems like they put so much stock in him being attacks effective against all types that that's just good enough for him to have, right? And he can just do an additional normal, whereas Vegito just does a full-on additional super attack. And considering that their super attacks actually had effects, like raised attack and defense, Vegito getting an extra super is way better than Vegito doing an extra normal and being attacks effective against all types. So again, 2 anniversaries in a row where we've got a dual headliner Vegito and Gogetas, where the Vegito overall was considered better than the Gogeta. So again, like, we're not drawing a conclusion yet, but when we see this whole like Gogeta always gets treated better than Vegito kind of argument, like, we've got 2 anniversaries in the bag so far, 3rd and 5th, where that was not the case, right? So then we had the biggest one that people mention for being a letdown for Gogeta fans is the STR Vegito that came out for the worldwide with Buhan, arguably the best unit in the game, had the damage reduction and countering of the supers. Actually, did he have any? No, he didn't have damage reduction pre-EZA. So again, that was where even on release, he could take some damage from the toughest bosses, but he would be outputting a bunch of damage. He had built-in crits, he was doing counters, he had a scouter for 10 turns, which was the big thing. So at that time, that was such a ridiculously powerful ability to keep your entire team like protected. So Vegito was just incredibly good. And bear in mind, like, look at the date. This guy came out 29th of August on both versions because it was worldwide, 2020. Right, and then we got Tech Gogeta in June on JP. So it's like 9 months later, right? It was like Tanabata LR. And this guy, obviously starting off as Goku Vegeta as well, this guy is very, very similar to the STR Vegito. Like, they're considered essentially the counterparts, like, to each other, as they've often done, whether they've released them at the same time or not, with these Gogeta and Vegito cards where they make them similar in a lot of ways. But Gogeta is just worse in a lot of ways. He was still really, really good on release, and I see people, when people have been having this argument about Vegito and Gogeta on the timeline, I see people using that to kind of like dismiss Gogeta fans being annoyed that this Gogeta wasn't as good as Vegito, is people saying, well, he was still one of the best units in the game when he came out, and it's like, he was, that is true, but he wasn't as good as Vegito. Like, for some reason, he only has a scouter for 5 turns. Not really sure why. Obviously, he doesn't have a counter, which is always the big difference between these guys. He gets attacks effective against all types. He has a slightly higher built-in crit chance. Still gets the extra key. And then he does have damage reduction, which is good compared to the base, like the Vegito, what he had on release. And then receiving, this is always the interesting thing, he could nullify unarmed super attacks, but only after he'd already 18 key supered the enemy. So if the enemy was supering you in like slot 1 then it just made no difference because you couldn't use this ability. So Tech Gogeta, don't get me wrong, was very good on release, very powerful, very fun to use, but like Vegito, the STR Vegito, who essentially is his counterpart, was just better than him again. So there's another pairing of Vegitos and Gogetas that are just like Vegito's just better, and they didn't even come out at the same time. Vegito came out like 9 months before and is arguably better than the Tech Gogeta. So fast forward again, I'm missing out on some of the ones that aren't like Dokkan Fest or anything like that, but then we fast forward to the 7th year anniversary, and this is, I guess, the big one where Vegito fans really got upset, because both units for the 7th anniversary headliners essentially were Gogeta cards, because the Super Saiyan 4s properly fused into Gogeta, and then the gods obviously transformed into blue, but then their active skill was them fusing into Gogeta. So this was, I remember at the time, like a lot of Vegito fans very unhappy. There was basically like a full Gogeta anniversary with no representation for Vegito at all, which, I mean, you can't really, there's nothing I can say against that. Like, that is true, right? Both the units had Vegito-y things, Gogeta-y things, I should say. No Vegito to be seen for this part of the celebration. And this was the 7th year. The 8th year, they obviously did some different stuff. And then for the 9th year, one of the units was another Gogeta. So, I mean, I guess you could say, like, starting from the 7th year, this is probably where the focus seemed to shift more towards Gogeta, because we didn't get a new Vegito for the 7th year. And then the 9th year, we got a Gogeta as the only fusion of the anniversary, because obviously he was the counterpart to the Broly, because they did Gogeta versus Broly again. Obviously they didn't do Buhan versus Vegito as the other part of the anniversary. This is where we finally got Beast Gohan. So this is another tick in the Gogeta column, I guess. So it feels like it's more the recent years that Gogeta is starting to take over, right? Because then that brings us up to the 10th anniversary. And of course, this is where we got the new Vegito and Gogeta, two best units in the game at the time of release. A lot of people made arguments for why Gogeta could be better. Like, I think the Goku part of the card, like the second like exchange, the Goku versus the Tech Vegeta, the AGL Goku is probably better in a lot of situations. And Gogeta can do a lot of stuff. Like, not only can he hit incredibly hard, if you're getting the rainbow orbs, he can have like ridiculous damage reduction and defense, and his active skill mega buffs everybody. So on his active skill turn, the whole team just looks better, right? But then Vegito was basically that guy in the 10th anniversary and all the 10th anniversary content, that you get Vegito out, you use his active skill, and you just win. And some of the 10th anniversary bosses had some insane amounts of HP, and it felt like doing those events with any team that didn't have a Tech Vegito on it was just a massive slog, because of how much this guy could absolutely destroy these bosses. So again, like, I know a lot of people do make arguments for Gogeta being better, and some do a lot more now because of how the events have changed, but we're talking about on release specifically. Most people were in agreement that Vegito was better. So again, even though we got a little bit more Gogeta love in like the 7th anniversary, and then him having a card for the 9th anniversary, for the 10th anniversary we're right back to the Vegito card being better than the Gogeta card. So in terms of, in fact, every anniversary where the headliners have been a Gogeta and a Vegito, the general consensus is that the Vegito has been better. The only exception, of course, I guess you could call it, because it's an anniversary level celebration, as they like to say, now that we are back to the beginning and back to where we are right now with the STR Goku. Like, if you want to, because you can't really, I guess if you're going to say that the 7th anniversary units were Gogeta cards, then obviously this guy is a Vegito card. So in terms of Vegito versus Gogeta treatment for the GDC, obviously it's completely weighted in the Gogeta favour. But I think you can see, by looking back across the years and looking at all these characters, it very clearly is not the case that like Gogeta always gets more love than Vegito in Dokkan. And as we've pointed out, like the 3 big anniversaries where both the headliners were Vegito and Gogeta, Vegito was considered better than Gogeta in all 3 of those. So there's been some spikes along the way. I think it's kind of like anything, where it's like it does go in cycles, like the meme that I posted. Like, sometimes Vegito stuff is better than the Gogeta stuff. Sometimes Gogeta stuff is better. Sometimes we get a new Gogeta and we don't get a new Vegito for a while. Sometimes we get a Vegito and we don't get a Gogeta for a while, like a few years back where we went from getting like the new, I think it was in that period after the Int Gogeta, we got a new Super Vegito, and then a new Vegito Blue within a very short space of time, and you know, we didn't get another Gogeta until the 3rd anniversary. So I don't know, let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. There's always going to be the argument between the two, and I've always said, like, over the years, when it comes to these big arguments that people get into of like which fusion is the best, like, I don't care about that at all. Like, fusion is just a plot device. Like, the only difference between Vegito and Gogeta is the aesthetic, whether you like the fusion, like vest and everything, or you like the merging of the Goku and Vegeta clothes. And then some of the abilities are obviously unique, like the Spirit Sword is pretty much only for Vegito, the Soul Punish are pretty much only for Gogeta. But Dokkan does a lot of original stuff now as well, so they're all getting their own crazy attacks and things, and different versions of Goku and Vegeta's abilities and all that kind of stuff. It always annoys me when it's like, well, Vegito didn't win against Fusion Zamasu, but Gogeta would have. It's like, no, he wouldn't, because it was part of the plot that they didn't defeat Zamasu at that point. So I think everyone should just do what I do, like both the fusions. They're both cool in their own ways. Sometimes it's annoying when we get the dual releases and one is better than the other, regardless of which one it is. But, I mean, that's always going to happen in a gacha game. It happens with Goku and Vegeta cards all the time. It happens with the Super vs Extreme cards all the time. It's not like a huge thing. So for me, I really don't see the Gogeta always gets all the love and Vegito doesn't get anything, especially when we look back at some of the examples that we've seen in this video. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Are you a Vegito fan who does feel hard done by? Are you a Gogeta fan that's loving all the current stuff? Are you someone like me that's in the middle and just likes to see cool things regardless of what it is? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comment section. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ninja, and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.